My name is Jenna Orkin. With us today is Quentin, the author of The Naked Civil Servant, How to Become a Virgin, How to Have a Lifestyle, and Doing It with Style, written with Donald Carroll. Mr. Crisp, I'm very intrigued about the ways you have of becoming a virgin. Did you write this book because it was a goal you found many people wanted to achieve?
Oh, I do think in America you could say roughly that everybody wants to be on television. And it does contain this purifying, redemptive element whereby all your previous sins are wiped away. It only matters that you've actually been on television.
How marvelous. What a simple solution. Doesn't it enhance some people's sins, magnify them?
I wouldn't have thought so. The mere fact that you're on television means that people speak to you and want to be with you, and probably they want to know how to get onto television. You see, the difference between Americans and all other nations is that Americans want you to succeed because they feel you will drag them forward with you, whereas other nations hope you'll fail for they fear you may leave them behind.
I see.
There seems to me the very minimum of envy in America. If there's any, I would say it was about money. A feeling that some people are rich undeservingly, whatever that may mean. That's a vague idea I think that a lot of people have. But about their fame, very few people in America say, I don't know what the fuss is about, I don't know why this or that person is always on television or always on the radio. They just think it's your luck, and it bestows this kind of divinity upon you.
But isn't there envy if they want to be carried along with you?
It doesn't seem to me. I've heard very few people say that somebody doesn't deserve their success. In fact, I'm not sure that there's the theory of a deserved success really enters into people's heads. I think success in America is thought to fall out of the sky upon some people. And once you've seen this happen, you touch them, you cling on to them.
What about the poor boy who does good, the Horatio Alger syndrome? Does that not apply?
I don't know, it may do. I've never heard of anyone saying somebody was worthy or unworthy of their acclaim, just that it had happened to them. And the way, I think, to deal with it is to try to share it with as many people as possible. That's the only way I know of trying to deal with it.
Now, are there many examples of people who've acquired vicarious fame through clinging to somebody famous, little pilot fish?
I would say there were, especially in the case of a marriage, that there are people who really are Mrs. somebody, and that was their chief claim to greatness. I mustn't name any, because if I did, I would be accused of trying to tear them down and diminish their fame. But I think this is so. There are also the children of famous people. And
you can't blame them. They could hardly help.
They can't help that. And indeed, sometimes they do try to escape. They change their name. They refuse to use the name of their parents because perhaps they do feel unworthy. Now more will be expected of me because my parents are so famous.
Yes.
How do I explain that I am quite ordinary when my parents are well known? So I think that does happen to the children. To the wives or the husbands or the lovers of people, I don't think this does happen because they feel they have been chosen. Yes. Therefore they do in some sense share the glory.
Now, the title of your book is How to Become a Virgin. Has it, in fact, created many virgins?
Oh, television creates virgins all the time. People go on to television because they've committed murders. And nobody the next day passes them by with averted gaze in the street. They rush up to them. And even when people can't remember your name or why you are on television, they stand in front of you and say, you're, and it's a game. You just stand there saying, yes, and see if they can remember who you are.
Yes. Who have you been mistaken for?
In my lifetime, I've been mistaken for RT, who was very famous fashion designer, as you may know, chiefly of movie clothes. I once was mistaken for Robert Helpman, and of course there was, when I first arrived, no distinction between me and John Hurt in the minds of most people, because they used to say, are you him or the other one? They recognized that either I was...
Which one are you?
That's right, it's hard to say. But of course, Mr. Hurt stepped into that part and dug himself into it in a remarkable way, because he was acting the life of somebody whose experience was totally unknown to him.
Yes.
And that really takes some doing.
Yes. Now, I'm wondering if perhaps it's possible to appear on television without becoming a virgin, since some people might be concerned.
This, I suppose, could be so. I think it's unlikely. You could be on once without people rushing up to you and saying they'd seen you. But I think when you've been on half a dozen times, you must expect, and should, I think, welcome graciously any virginity that is bestowed upon you.
Yes.
But certainly you can't escape being redeemed by the wickedness of your life. There are people who sit on television in front of 8 million people and say, really, I'm a very private person.
Yes.
This I find a rather strange thing for anyone to say. I would have thought one went on to television precisely to impinge on the imaginations of other people, to enter the dreams of other people.
Yes. Now, in your book on lifestyles, how to have a lifestyle, you say that it's very important to be consistent in one's lifestyle, to be loyal to it. What do you do if, let's say you have a very flamboyant personality, but you happen to play in the Philharmonic or you happen to be a nun? How do you reconcile these things?
You could be a flamboyant nun, and indeed there have been such. Certainly I would say that St. Teresa made no effort to conceal any aspect of her life. I think she lived as a public nun. Or how would we know so much about her?
The French one, you mean?
No, partly the French one, but more especially the very bold one, the Spanish Teresa.
Yes.
I think she wished to be known as a nun, wished to be seen to be a nun by the world. Now, whether you were allowed to rush up to her and say, surely you're St. Teresa, I don't know. Perhaps you weren't allowed to do that. But I think most of the people who come to the notice of the world have wished to do so. Not all of them. You could commit a murder hoping you would never be known, and then you could become famous. And some murderers are more famous than others, which is very strange, because the murderers perhaps the same or equal, and yet Crippen is a name almost in murder.
Yes.
So the more people know about him than many others.
And there is room for your style to manifest itself. You could wear purple shoelaces or something, I suppose.
I think you will find that unless, as you say, you work in a proper office, well, the bank is always the example put forward. I think you would then be asked not to wear purple shoelaces. And I know a man in England who worked in a men's outfitters and was asked not to arrive on a bicycle, because this was unbefitting to anyone who ran a men's clothes shop. So yes, you might have to abandon it for the sake of earning a living in a way you knew how to earn a living. But then you would have to live the rest of your life flamboyantly.
What do you do if your style doesn't suit your appearance? If you feel very prim and proper, but you have the misfortune to look like Sophia Loren?
This, I think, would be worrying. And you would have to find ways. You would wear very modest clothes, which, if possible, didn't show more than the very least of your figure. Your figure was implied and never exhibited. And then the rest would be up to your manner. And indeed, when you are a nun, you are taught how to have a modest manner. And a nun never walks in the center of a pavement or in the center of a corridor. They walk to the side out of humility.
I see. Is it important that we adhere to our lifestyles 24 hours a day? I mean, do you think that the Queen has to step regally into the shower? Or does it only depend on who's looking at you?
No, I think you have to convince yourself. In fact, perhaps I have laid in the various books too much emphasis on the effect of your style or others, though that is the great reward. You must first of all convince yourself. So I think you should never abandon it.
Oh dear.
I think it's as well to form the habit of your style. Otherwise you may lapse. Now you take someone who is prim in public and who swears when they're alone. That's very dangerous, or one day you will swear in public.
Yes.
It's as well to remind yourself every hour of every day that you are prim, or whatever it is you've decided to be.
Is it impossible for an actor to adhere to his lifestyle? You've been an actor. You played Lady Bracknell in The Importance of Being Earnest. You played Lord Alfred Douglas. Doesn't an actor have to adopt the style of whatever character he's playing?
He does if he's decided to be an actor rather than a star. The essence of stardom is that you wear the part, you put it on and stalk about in your own way in it. Whereas the actor, yes, makes a great effort not to revert to his ordinary way of walking, speaking, smiling. And this is, of course, not all, this is part of acting, is to acquire certain mannerisms for the part, which, as you say, you abandon the moment you get out of the theatre. Though a lot of actors have been known to maintain the part throughout the entire run of a show or the making of a movie.
Do you think they have difficulty shedding it afterwards?
Well, I think they don't. No, I don't think they have difficulty shedding it once it's over. Within a week, it will have evaporated. While it's on, they may think, for the reasons we've just been discussing, I won't go back to smoking in private life, because then I shall forget, and I shall have the mannerisms of a smoker.
Yes.
And indeed, one has seen people in costume parts who have stained fingers, because no one's actually caught sight of them.
Is it possible for a stylist to model himself on someone, or should he just establish his own independence? For instance, you say that you gave up reading a long time back, and that you believe books are only to be written rather than read. I'm wondering if we should follow your example and not read your books.
That would be worrying to my publishers.
Yes.
So we'd better say, read no books except mine. But if you want to write a book, you should certainly never read the books in the category in which you're going to write. If you're going to write the story of your life, do not sit down and read a lot of autobiographies, because inevitably you will come to try and write a kind of literature, which is a terrible mistake. As I see it, the way you speak should be just the same as the way you write.
Did you ever have any models that you would admit to, either in your life or your writing?
No, I have read books when much younger and greatly admired the style of some of them.
Such as?
Well, I would consider Damon Runyon one of the great stylists of all time.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say, oh, well, I too will write everything in the present tense, which is one of his, the attributes of his literary style. Because what you can't, of course you adopt other things. We live by imitation. Imitation is all we've got. We would never have learnt to walk or speak, except that we can imitate. And undoubtedly you will see things in shop windows and you think, I'd like one of those and I will wear it. And you meet people and you say, oh, how beautifully they speak. I will try and lower my voice so that it has this magnetic quality. But what you mustn't do is imagine if you adopt an entire style from somebody else, that you will receive the same rewards. Because you won't. Because you will be seen to be wearing this style rather than living it. But yes, I think everybody adopts some mannerisms of other people almost unconsciously.
Did Mr. Runyon influence your style in any way? Or?
No, he didn't, but perhaps less so because his style is so marked.
Yes.
Perhaps when you read people whose style is in a way to have no style, then you are influenced by it without even knowing it, in the way that you speak like your parents, and when people say, oh, I've known anyway you speak just like your father, and you fly into a terrible rage because nobody likes to be told they're like their relatives. But you're doing it unconsciously. So I think you do adopt things deliberately, and you do adopt them unconsciously, but you should really be very careful not to adopt an entire image, saying, now I will be as much loved as Marlene Dietrich.
Yes.
This is absurd.
Yes. Who influenced the style you adopted for your person?
I think when very young, the movie stars did, the women movie stars did make me feel that I must stalk about and adopt this heroic manner. But of course by the time the world has touched you, by the time you're 25, you know you can't go on in that way. You're just living in a dream. You must live in the world, and you must find a way of expressing who you truly are. And that is what your style is.
As an actor, were you more an actor or a star?
As an actor, I was, well, it's absurd, of course, to say I was a star when I was in a sort of dim cellar in the lower half of Manhattan. But yes, I was in a way lending my presence, because undoubtedly I was invited into the shows to bring a certain news value, in the endeavor to bring news value to the occasion. So you could say I was a person borrowed from outside and landed in the middle of the part, rather than someone thinking, how can I be more like an aristocratic Victorian woman trying to find a suitable husband for her daughter.
You were like a shooting star.
That's right, yes, exactly.
Are some lifestyles better than others?
They're better as they make it clearer to you and to the world who you are. If your style really is so that we walk into a room where you live and we think, I knew she lived here. So that everything you wear, and so that if one saw in a shop a dress and one could say, that would suit Miss Orkin, you see, then we know exactly what, we must have a real idea of who you are. So you must have a style, you must have found a way of telling the world who you are. And so a style is not better because it's more flamboyant. It's better and better as it moves to the center of your being.
So there are no particular people around today whose styles you would admire?
I think style is tending to go out because there is so much freedom. You see, freedom is against style. You might say, the freer you are to choose your style.
Yes.
But human nature is such that if every kind of clothing is in the shops, every kind of clothing will be bought, and you won't have had to make up your mind. Now, when I was young, I was given one good suit a year. So I made up my mind that it would, if possible, represent me, rather than thinking, well, I'll get rid of it in a week if I don't like it. So I think that means that style is on the decline, because freedom is blossoming. We're all freer to get married once a year. Yes. So you don't think, have I adopted the marriage which really represents me? Am I with the person that people will say, who else could she have married?
Yes.
You see, that's what I think would be part of your style. If your style was your marriage, it would have to be something that people would know you had to marry one another.
So when times were more restricted and the fashions were more set, it was easier to have your own style because all you had to do was not shop in the shops where everybody else was shopping.
That's true, and also you had to have a clear idea of yourself. You see, This is the point. You then had to think, I can't move my apartment once a year,
yes.
so I better find a place I can live in forever. And if I'm going to wear one fur coat for a lifetime, it had better be a fur coat that really, I feel, represents my view of myself. So it's the restraints put on you that make you fight to have your style and really think what it is. Now, for instance, you can get a grant for anything. Therefore, people retire at the age of 35 and they're just retired students. They've never learned anything.
It's not so easy anymore, I don't think.
Well, it may be more difficult now.
Whom today would you admire the way you revered the movie stars of yesterday?
It isn't easy, but there are people who come to mind as having invented themselves. And I suppose the greatest is Mr. Warhol.
Yes.
And in a way, his style is to have no style. He can be at a party and everybody is saying, there he is, there's Andy Warhol, and he is doing nothing. He's not even speaking. Now, this is a great triumph, because it's so apparently effortless.
Well, he's the one who said he was famous for being famous and everybody would get their 15 minutes shift.
That's right.
Your books tend to have a somewhat biblical air, and you have, I think, the air of a prophet, or at least you're my own personal guru, how to have a lifestyle, how to become a virgin. And now I understand you're working on something called Manners from Heaven. Now, from what I gather from your other books, you don't believe in heaven and you wouldn't want to be there if it existed. Have you in fact been there since we last spoke?
Well, in a way, yes. Of course, living in Manhattan is a kind of heaven, because everybody is your friend. And this is very remarkable to anyone who comes from somewhere else. People do not speak to you in the street. They do not speak to you the moment you sit next to them in a bus. In England, the great phrase in England is, I didn't want to get involved. But in America, everyone longs to be involved.
It's a quintessential New York phrase now.
Is it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, that surprises me, because, as I say, as far as I'm concerned, I find everybody is noticeably friendly, not merely not unfriendly, but actually noticeably friendly.
So heaven is New York?
Yes.
Ah, this will come as a surprise. Well, you seem to be something of a cross between an apostle and Mrs. Post. What other books are you planning?
Well, we may write, I know Mr. Glassner, who wrote The Dime Store Days. And apart from all these knickknacks which he has collected, he also has files of famous movie stars of the 30s and 40s. And it might be fun to put them all together and explain what stardom is and what variation each of these people had upon the theme of stardom.
Have you analyzed it so far? Can you tell us what is the secret?
Well, the secret is, of course, the conviction about yourself, which overrides the part you're given. So that if you ask yourself, if you see Camille, and you say, do I see before me a sentimental French woman who lived with men for money? The answer is no, I see Miss Garbo.
Yes.
And so obviously her conviction about herself, the rightness of her existence on the screen, must be such that she could do this. She could convert the movie to her own use.
Yes, convert is the word. What's the difference between stardom and being an evangelical saint, Christian, prophet?
Well, of course, morally, I suppose there's an enormous difference. But the effect, in a way, is similar. That is to say, people do collect the photographs.
I think perhaps the difference is that movie stars have more power.
That could be so. More power on this earth. We must be careful
That's
what we
right.
say.
And how did you find finally appearing on stage?
I was worried because, of course, I'm too old to learn the lines. I'm sure there are actors of my age and beyond it who can learn lines because they've had the practice. I have never spoken other people's lines on the stage before.
Yes.
So I never really memorized all the lines, and this was worrying because it affects the other people. You say the words in the wrong order and they don't know have you finished or not. Should they speak now?
Oh, I would imagine that would be, not to mention worrying to you.
It's very worrying to them. And it was only worrying to me because it worried them. I, once on the stage in Lady Bracknell, forgot the lines absolutely, and I said to the audience, I'm sorry, I've forgotten what I was going to say.
And it was the biggest hit of the evening.
Yes, it amused them, frightened the other actors, of course.
Did you solve the problem?
Yes, someone did actually give me the right lines, and then I said them and the play went on.
How reassuring. The show always does seem to go on. I understand our time is up. We've been speaking to Quentin Crisp, who wrote The Naked Civil Servant, which I understand is coming out as a trade paperback. Does this mean it's supported by the trade of the civil service?
I don't know what it means. It's a phrase I've never heard till I got here in America.
Coming out in April. How to Have a Lifestyle, How to Become a Virgin, and Doing It with Style, written in conjunction with Donald Carroll. Thank you very much, Mr. Crisp. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.